G'day guys, and today I want to go on a bit of a tirade against the mainstream media, specifically with regard to their treatment of the delicate situation in the Korean Peninsula. Obviously we have the negotiations between US and the two Koreas, China's getting involved, Japan's getting involved, and we're obviously working towards a peaceful solution there, an official end to the Korean War, denuclearization, potentially even a reunification of the Koreas. But the lack of journalistic standards from the mainstream media could be, in fact, threatening this delicate balance of, political maneuvering and Shakespearean theatre, because they refuse to check sources, they refuse to restrain themselves in their attacks against Trump. And so, for a prime example of this, I'm going to ask us all to think back to May earlier this year, after the Trump-Kim summit in Vietnam, where it was widely reported that North Korea had executed its former top nuclear envoy, Hyok Chol. So what was essentially said was that this person, along with a few others, had been purged following the summit due to Kim's displeasure. This is not the first time that this has occurred. As we'll see here, it has been reported that the many members of Kim Jong-un's inner circle, his Politburo, whatever you want to call it, have been reported as dead only to turn up later. So this is not a one-off. This has occurred many times before, and it really does threaten the delicate balance because, of course, we don't want to be antagonizing people that we're trying to negotiate with and spreading lies about them. Well, that's pretty antagonistic. So what I've got up here is a big list of all the newspapers and mainstream media outlets that ran this story. These are at least all the ones that I know of. And interesting thing to note that ABC News Australia, their story is actually still up, and you can go look at this months old story. It has no redaction, no apology, no correction, no nothing. It's still up there, proclaiming its truth despite the fact that it has been widely discredited, obviously and objectively discredited, because this top nuclear envoy appeared on live TV next to Kim Jong-un. We know he's not dead, and yet this false story, this piece of fake news, ironically enough, is still up on ABC News Australia, being funded by me and you, because of course ABC News is a taxpayer-funded institution. What we're going to be seeing over the next couple minutes is a lot of slides from various journalists and things like that who have tweeted out, retweeting either the Bloomberg article or the Reuters or anyone else who wrote up a fake news story on this, and I've just included all their names here if you want to screenshot these for future reference. But this is a big problem. This is a huge problem because essentially this Bloomberg story got its source from a South Korean newspaper, or South Korean branch of mainstream media, which is notorious for its lies and slander about North Korea. No surprises there, seeing as, of course, they're mutual enemies, of course. And that South Korean mainstream media center itself got its story from one unconfirmed source. Now, other people have since been able to find out this information, hence why I know about it, but it beggars belief that none of these smart talking heads or anyone at these massive multi-billion-dollar companies decided to go digging for an actual source. No, they had to, get the story out as quick as possible. They wanted that hot take, that juicy scoop, and they wanted to have a dig at Trump. And that's what you're seeing in a lot of these tweets. That they want to point out the fact that Trump failed at the Trump-Kim summit, and his failure resulted in the deaths of people. And they also want to point out how Trump kisses ass and how he loves dictators. That was the line written at the time. Despite the fact that Trump is moving towards a peaceful solution in the Koreas, it was widely propagandized that, he's more willing to work with dictators and Democrats and stupid shit like that. Thankfully, there were some cooler heads who didn't want to just jump down the throat and try to get a clickbaity story out. A few of those examples here, but it seems for the most part, the mainstream media was very quick to, of course, rush out their stories without checking sources, and again, potentially antagonizing a state that the US is at least trying to negotiate with, which could lead to the peaceful reunification of Korea and, of course, the uplifting of millions of people out of communism, authoritarianism, the famines that could come around at any time if the smugglers stop bringing in food. And, this is just the extent of Trump's derangement syndrome. Trump can do nothing right, and every opportunity that can be taken to attack him will be taken, regardless of how tenuous it may be. The truly terrible thing, if there can be anything worse than antagonizing a rogue nuclear state, is the fact that these people, all these blue check marks on Twitter, all these organizations like the New York Times and HuffPo and all these sorts of things. They claim to be the authority on what should be allowed online, what level of free speech is acceptable. And these are the people pushing, made up hate speech laws. Of course, hate speech being just speech that you don't like. They want to censor the internet. They want to shut down independent commentators. They're, of course, constantly running hit pieces on any independent commentator. It doesn't matter if you're left-wing or right-wing. It's not a partisan issue. Of course, right-wing people being on sort of the more countercultural side of it, more directly opposed to the mainstream media, they're, of course, going to be attacked more. But left-wing commentators are frequently attacked as well. You also have pages on Facebook and Twitter and those mainstream or lamestream sources being blocked all the time. I believe there was a recent purge of about 17,000 channels on YouTube. I haven't quite looked into that yet, but if that's true, well, that's the thing. These big companies are very keen to push out independent voices like myself. It's very interesting to me that when I started up my YouTube page, even though I am an absolute single-celled organism on the grand scale of independent commentary, just knocking over something there in the background, YouTube still saw fit to basically put up a slot of recommended channels on my page, even though I had no subscribers, recommending things like CNN and Fox News, all these very boring and upright services that are ultimately incredibly inefficient in their delivery of material. That's something else to think about. That's why these groups are being so vicious. It's because their style of communicating information is slow and inefficient. They got to the internet late, and they still insist on running either newspaper stories, which take time to print, or having the big studio with the roll-in and the makeup and the 17 people operating the cameras, whereas people like you and me, which will just get a $20 microphone off Amazon, or record things on your phone, there's a very low overhead. It costs me basically no money to run this channel, but it costs millions for these people to run a channel. And essentially, when I can get out content quicker than them, or other people, of course, because I'm not doing this for a job, well, it's going to cost these people heaps of money, because obviously people are going to they want to find out something, and if they see an independent content maker's material first, then they're obviously going to go to them, and that draws money away from the mainstream media. So of course that's the reason why they're so vicious. But again, in their viciousness, in their haste to attack Trump, to attack the mainstream, to attack the alternative media, I should say, they keep making these absolute entry-level mistakes in that they clearly haven't checked the source on this very important story. I mean, this is a big story. If Kim Jong-un had executed nuclear envoys and diplomats and negotiators for their failures at the summit, that's a big problem. But he didn't, and we know he didn't, because this person turned up on TV a few weeks later, and no apologies, no retractions. For fuck's sake, the story is still up on ABC News Australia, and these are the people that we're supposed to trust in policing what is acceptable speech online, who's an extremist, who's a Nazi, and essentially they want a complete monopoly over reality, which is a insanely dangerous thing to give to these people if they can't even be bothered to check sources. So that's the tirade I want to go on today. Just reminding you all, if you need to be reminded, that the mainstream media are a bunch of talentless hacks. And again, picture if independent content creators had run with this story and we had reported and said, this has happened, this terrible thing, Kim Jong-un has done this, shame on him, and that sort of thing, and the mainstream media did its proper research and found out this to be false. Well, there would be major calls for deplatforming, conspiracy theorists, radical YouTube, and all this bullshit. But since they're the mainstream media, they just hope people won't notice, and they carpet sweep and run stories about celebrities. So big problem. Don't trust the mainstream media. Don't let anyone have a complete monopolization over your reality. Consume multiple media sources, check sources, and actually be a journalist, because apparently we can't rely on actual accredited gone to uni journalists to do that sort of thing anymore. We have to rely on independent commentators like myself. And as always, I appreciate the support and feedback down in the comments. It really does make a difference. That's about all I have to say today. So thanks all for sticking around, and have a good one.